So, here I am at Matthews Ridge Airport. It says airport in the sim, but really it's just a strip of land long enough to handle aircraft up to about DC-3 size. I'm going to try to locate the school I used to attend in this town. Honestly, I have no fond memories of the place. They seem to believe that hitting children with thin bamboo canes was an acceptable way to instill discipline. That philosophy worked right up until I hurled a chair and then a table at one such teacher, looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Dare you continue and see what will happen." I remember thinking with absolute clarity that I would die right there before surrendering my personal sovereignty to physical abuse. A 10-year-old should never have to think that way or be pushed into behaving that way, but the choice was not mine. I had simply decided that I would not comply with being beaten. I had never liked school. Even as a child, I regarded much of it as being about as far removed from genuine education as one could get. To me, being forced to memorize, repeat, and comply was not the same thing as learning. Learning requires curiosity, engagement, and the freedom to question. Compulsion may produce obedience, but obedience should never be mistaken for understanding. At its worst, education without curiosity becomes little more than indoctrination and social programming. I eventually became a dedicated truant, and I make no apology for that. Because the strange thing is that once I began escaping the classroom, real learning began for me. I read because I wanted to know. I explored because I was curious. I followed questions wherever they led instead of waiting for someone to tell me which page to open. Schooling and education are not always the same thing. For me, the real education began when I started taking responsibility for my own mind. The road system here is surprisingly accurate to real life. Back in 1978, though, the place was much more industrial, huge piles of logs, active tree felling, heavy machinery moving around, and everything wrapped in dust, heat, and humidity. It doesn't look like I'm going to find the school on this trip, at least not right now. It consisted of two main buildings in an L shape, with a playground set between them. Still, being here is bringing back other memories. I remember Goliath beetles falling from the trees into the school playground. There were so many crushed beetles lying around that you actually had to watch where you put your feet. Whenever one of the poor creatures landed or fell from a tree, some of the kids, feral bastards, would immediately rush over and stamp on it. I never understood the appeal of that. Back in Pupaya, I had a growing collection of the beetles which I fed fruit. The largest ones were magnificent, and I would sometimes let one, Fred, cling to my right arm like a living armor-plated bracelet. Occasionally, outsiders would come into town. I remember them as members of what would later become infamous as the People's Temple. Even as a child, there was something about them that felt different. They seemed unfriendly, withdrawn, and intensely suspicious of everyone around them. Dark glasses were common, conversation was minimal, and there was an atmosphere about them that was difficult to define at the time. They did not behave like ordinary visitors passing through town. They kept to themselves, watched everything, and gave very little away. My father once tried to strike up a conversation with one of them. Nothing confrontational, just ordinary human curiosity and a polite attempt to talk. He was completely blanked, no real response, no attempt at conversation. Just that same closed, guarded silence. Of course, none of us knew then what the name People's Temple would eventually come to mean. At the time, they were simply these strange, insular people who occasionally appeared in town, bought what they needed, and left behind a distinctly uncomfortable atmosphere. Okay then, school not found. The worst memory I have of that place? A large sloth once made the mistake of wandering into the school playground at exactly the wrong moment, while the kids were out on break. It ended up being hacked through the lower spine with a cutlass. Technically a machete, but in Guyana we called them cutlasses. Fucking savages. Right, enough of that. On to Pupaya. Later, I would witness the aftermath of that experiment with my own eyes. On my way to school along that dirt road, I saw DC-3s being loaded with bagged bodies, part of the grim recovery operation following the deaths at Jonestown. Even now, I remember the smell. It was horrific, heavy and cloying, the kind of stench that seems to attach itself to memory as much as to the air. As a child, I could not possibly have understood the full scale of what I was witnessing. I only knew that something terrible had happened, and that the strange, guarded people we had occasionally seen in town were now connected to a tragedy almost beyond comprehension. May those who died there never be reduced to a number, a headline, or a historical curiosity. May they never be forgotten. From the airstrip, there should be a path heading west. I'll need to follow it if I'm going to find the base again. I need to follow this road, or what remains of it, for roughly 11,000 meters. Somewhere ahead lies Pupaya. The base itself has been abandoned for decades, so whatever is still visible now will simply be whatever the jungle, or the bush as we called it, has not yet managed to reclaim. Roads fade, buildings collapse, clearings close over, and the forest slowly takes everything back. I'm not really looking for a preserved base anymore. I'm looking for fragments of one. I need to keep the road in sight as much as possible. It is remarkably easy to lose your bearings in jungle like this, even from the air, especially when you haven't already fixed landmarks and reference points in your memory. Once the road disappears beneath the canopy, everything can begin to look the same very quickly. I remember one pioneer suffering a horrific accident on this route, degloving his right leg from the knee all the way down to the ankle. Injuries and vehicle accidents on the road were not particularly unusual. Back then, this was not some gentle drive through tropical scenery. It was a working road through the bush, used by Land Rovers, trucks and heavy machinery, and in bad weather it could punish the smallest mistake. I traveled this road twice a day as a child, going to and from school in a Land Rover, in blazing sunshine and torrential rain. During the rainy season, it could become genuinely dangerous. The surface would turn to mud, vehicles would slide, and what was already a rough jungle road could become treacherous. I absolutely loved it. It was somewhere in this area that I was nearly killed by a huge green anaconda. right in front of my brothers. I happened to be running when it exploded out of the bush on my left. Had I been walking, or even a few seconds slower, I might quite literally have been turned into snake shit decades ago. Sometimes survival really does come down to timing. I must admit, it makes me strangely happy to see that so much of this landscape is still as I remember it. They have not simply cleared the forest away and replaced it with roads, buildings and development. The bush is still here, vast and dominant, stretching out in every direction. In some places, it feels as though very little has changed at all. Human structures come and go, roads fade, bases are abandoned, and machinery disappears. But the forest simply waits. Given enough time, it takes everything back. There is something reassuring about that. Nearly half a century has passed, yet much of the landscape that surrounded my childhood is still here beneath me. The people have changed, the buildings may be gone, and Pupaya itself may now exist only in fragments, but the forest remains. In a strange way, it feels like the one part of the memory that time has not managed to erase. This bend, now this feels familiar. The shape of the road, the way it curves through the bush, something about it is beginning to lock into place. I may not remember every detail perfectly after all these years, but this feels like ground I once knew. If my memory is right, Pupaya is not far from here now. After all this distance, all these years, and all the jungle that has grown back around it, I think I'm finally getting close. Afterwards, they built a memorial here. Nothing grand, a tree trunk bearing the names of those who had died. There was something appropriate about that. The thing that had taken life transformed into something that carried their names. But that memorial is gone now. Pereira later said the area had been mined and the monument desecrated. The buildings disappeared. The roads faded. The jungle came back. And now, nearly half a century later, I'm flying over the place where it happened. Somewhere beneath me is that ground. Perhaps the exact location has vanished beneath the bush. Perhaps there is no marker left, no stone, no plaque, nothing to tell someone passing through that people once stood here, laughed here, worked here, argued here, dreamed here, and that some of them never went home. That troubles me. There it is, Pupaya. I'm bringing the aircraft down low now, not because there is much left to see from the air, but because somewhere beneath this canopy is ground that deserves more than a passing glance. Years later, Gerald Michael Pereira, himself a fifth intake pioneer here at Pupaya, gave evidence before the Veterans Commission of Inquiry. He spoke about the day a tree fell during an event at this center. One of its great branches came down among the pioneers and staff. 9 people were killed, according to his account. I remember that day differently in some details. Memory and history do not always arrive at the same place by the same road. But I remember the shock. I remember the people. I remember how quickly an ordinary day became something else entirely. Life played a terrible trick on all of us as that tree began to come down. Run left or run right, it hardly mattered. The tree was so vast that, from beneath it, there was no way to judge where the full weight of it would land. For those few seconds, There was no obvious safe direction, only movement, noise, and instinct. Then, at the very last moment, the main impact came down to my left. What followed is burned into my memory. Everything seemed to slow. I had time to watch Sergeant Major Wilson get struck and bounced into the air high above me, caught up around one of the enormous branches, tumbling with it as the tree came down. The last time I saw him, he was being tended to. His body was badly broken, and he was slipping into shock, strangely trying to read a newspaper upside down. Not the last time I have watched a dying man read a newspaper upside down. He died on the way to the airstrip. Even now that sequence remains impossibly clear. The falling tree, the confusion, the sudden silence after the impact, and the knowledge arriving far too quickly that some of the people around us were not going to survive. And later accounts do seem to corroborate what I remember actually happening. As the enormous tree came down, its branches became entangled with a smaller tree standing behind it. The force of the fall ripped that second tree completely out of the ground. It did not simply collapse with the first. It was torn free and hurled through the crowd like a giant spear. I know what I saw because in those few seconds, time seemed to slow almost to a standstill. It is difficult to describe unless you have experienced something similar. There was terror, certainly, but alongside it came an extraordinary clarity. Every movement seemed distinct from the next. I could see branches twisting, people running, bodies being struck, debris flying and that smaller tree being wrenched from the earth and thrown forward with devastating force. It was that secondary impact, as much as the main tree itself, that caused some of the most horrific injuries. A country should remember the people who died in its service. So I'm going to land, but will stay inside the helo. They were pioneers, staff, sons, daughters, friends, husbands, wives, brothers and sisters. One of them had even taught my brother how to drive a tractor. Minutes after the disaster, we found him beneath the fallen tree, killed where he stood. They were people with voices, habits, stories and lives that reached far beyond the moment they died here. The forest may have reclaimed Pupaya. It does not get to reclaim them. So this landing is for the fallen. May they rest in peace, and may they never be forgotten.